Production funding for Ruckus has been provided by Fred and Lou Hartwig and viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Ruckus, that weekly food for thought fight over the news of the day and the trends of the times. I'm Mike Shannon. The Ruckettes join me shortly. Our topics tonight: term limits may take a toll on the next city council. There's talk of adding a toll to I-70. And all told, 2015 could be a tough year for Obamacare. Plus roast and toast. But we start with our Newsmaker segment and welcome Kansas Insurance Commissioner Sandy Prager, who is leaving office next month after serving 3 terms. Commissioner Prager won office as a Republican, but has broken ranks with the party, endorsing the Democratic nominees in key Kansas races in November. Couple of key points of contention: the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, and the expansion of the Medicaid system in the state. To talk about those items and much more, we welcome Sandy Prager. Commissioner, thanks for joining us here on Ruckus.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Before we get into Obamacare and the expansion of Medicaid, let's talk about the Insurance Commissioner's office. You've been there 12 years. What's the major function of that office? What's your principal role?
Our primary responsibility is to protect consumers of insurance products. We're there to make sure that the contract that they purchase for insurance, whatever line of insurance it is lives up to its promise to pay.
Do you do that by yourself, or do you have a commission to work with?
I know. We have a great department of we're about.
But those are
125.
staff members, not appointed officials.
They're all staff members that I've hired. Some have been there. Actually, we just had a retiree that had been in the department 53 years. So some have been there through numerous insurance commissioners, elected commissioners over the years. So, but we have a great staff that take care of the consumer issues. And
well, over the course of 12 years, have you changed the office, or maybe I should ask, has the office changed you?
Oh, probably a little bit of both. I'm a better person for having been insurance commissioner because of the quality of the staff that I've been able to work with over the years. They are just the most dedicated public servants you could ever hope to find in any government agency.
Tell me what your legacy is in one sentence.
Fairness, balanced regulation, always doing the right thing.
Is it uncomfortable for you, having been a Republican, I guess, most of your adult life? Certainly you've run for office as a Republican, to be in opposition with the party over such things as Obamacare and Medicaid expansion? Isn't that a bit uncomfortable? You backed the nominees of the Democratic Party for the U.S. Senate, for governor, and to succeed you as insurance commissioner. Now, you lost all of those battles, but was it uncomfortable at the time?
Well, first, the nominee for U.S. Senate was an independent.
But he wasn't a Republican.
But he wasn't a Republican, you're right. And no, it wasn't uncomfortable because, again, I felt like I was doing the right thing. And I was not letting party politics dictate to me the person I should be supporting. I think we're way past due for this country to have a comprehensive health insurance program for all Americans. And while Obamacare, as it's affectionately called.
It's even called that by the president now.
It is, I know. He hopes it's a legacy, and he's going to wear the name proudly. It's not perfect. It could be better if we could have the parties come together and try to make improvements to it. But at least it's a start in terms of getting people covered. We have a big void, though, in that start here in Kansas.
Yeah. Because of the Medicaid expansion not taking place here, right, and not having the insurance exchanges.
That's right. In Kansas and Missouri, the legislatures and in Kansas, the governor has not supported the Medicaid expansion. We just had an editorial comment in our Lawrence paper yesterday from the hospital CEO of Lawrence Memorial saying this is going to cause hospitals to lose money. It's money that is tax dollars that is collected here in Kansas, goes to Washington, and is delivered back out to the states that are doing the Medicaid expansion.
Why do you suppose that so many Republicans, in fact, most Republicans, according to the polling, are opposed to Obamacare? Do they just not care about people getting health insurance?
I think it's more political than that. I think it's because they don't want to support anything President Obama has proposed. And I think when you ask, in fact, when you do some polling, if you ask people, do you like Obamacare? More than half say no. Do you like the fact that kids can stay on their parents' policies? Do you like the fact that you can now buy insurance based only on age and a few other issues, but not your health status. Those are popular provisions that are a part of the Affordable Care Act.
So you're leaving office early next year on retirement with your husband, who retired during the past year. We wish you well, and we thank you again for coming by and being a part of the program.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
That's Kansas Insurance Commissioner Sandy Prager. Now let's meet the panel and see if there is any way that we can possibly start a ruckus. Yale Abahaka is an editorial page writer at the Kansas City Star. Amy Patton is a blogger and Midwest Voices contributor to the Star. Steve Glorioso is a prominent political consultant and activist. Woody Cozad is the president of the Cozad Company, a government relations firm. So let's stay with the discussion about health issues and start with a pending U.S. Supreme Court case that has been somewhat under the radar. It's King v. Burwell, and the outcome could drive a hole through subsidies for those who applied for Obamacare at the healthcare.gov website, the federal website. The plaintiffs say the language of the law is clear. Subsidies go only to applicants on state-established exchanges. Many states under GOP control, including Missouri and Kansas, chose not to establish them. So if the court agrees with the plaintiffs, there are legal analysts and political pundits who say this will start the unraveling of Obamacare. Do you agree with that assessment, Steve?
Yes, if that were to happen, I don't think it will, but that would be the outcome. It's just, it does baffle me, more so at Christmas than any other time, that why conservatives would want to do something un-Christ-like and throw millions and millions of Americans out of their health insurance policy, to leave them without any insurance, to the whims of insurance companies. God forbid you get cancer the day after this law is repealed in some fashion and can't get insurance, or you find out they're not going to cover your ill son's lymphoma or whatever he or she may have. I mean, first of all, I also think that the Supreme Court, they are politicians. And if you don't believe that, then go back and look at the Gore and Bush
Well, I was going to mention the fact that the last time Obamacare was tested in the U.S. Supreme Court, people thought the individual mandate would be struck down, and in fact it was not.
John Roberts appears to be somewhat of a politician. This is a little different issue. It is in place. It is working. There'll be another several million people signed up by the time the decision is made or certainly announced. And I think that and something like gay marriage or same-sex marriage, I just don't think the Supreme Court has the guts to do something that would impact tens of millions of Americans, and something that they're already.
We're talking about people who already are receiving subsidies from the federal government, if those would be taken away. But do you think they would, Woody, or do you think that Congress and the president might find some way to adjust the situation, make it more tenable?
Well, first, I want to congratulate Steve for becoming the Jerry Falwell of the left. If you want to follow Christ, you must vote for his policies. Look. The Democrats made a calculation in this thing, and history supported them that it was the right calculation to make, which was if you offer the people of Missouri a whole bunch of goodies, if their legislature will do X, the legislature won't dare not do X. We have become sufficiently divided that the old calculation broke down. The Republicans wouldn't do it. So here we are. The law, as you say, Mike, is very clear. If it's not a state exchange, the subsidies don't apply.
In other words, the law means what it says.
Well, when you're interpreting a statute, the first rule is you interpret it first on the plain language of the statute. You don't go groping for legislative intent anywhere but within the four corners of the law unless you're somehow compelled to. They're not compelled to. The plain language is what it is. So the real question is Steve's question. Do they have the guts to do what they swore they would do when they were put on the Supreme Court?
But people haven't felt any pain yet as a result of states not establishing insurance exchanges and not making it possible for them to receive this coverage as a result of a state exchange.
Right, but I think that the Supreme Court, if they do strike down this law, they could send millions of people back into the uninsured pool, and then they destabilize the entire insurance industry. I mean, so then you have the people that are going to pay the higher premiums staying on insurance, and those people tend to be the unhealthy ones. Right now we have millions of people signing up for Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, that are the healthy ones. So the Supreme Court's in an interesting position of, are they going to destabilize our insurance, the medical field? And I think that that's also part of it. It's not just interpreting the law, but it's also destabilizing the entire medical field. And I don't know, so it's kind of bigger than just defining the law.
Yale, Steve's side of the argument says the intent of this law is obvious, that the Congress meant that people would get subsidies if they were eligible for health care insurance. Do you think that argument is valid?
I think it's a valid argument, but I'm actually going to agree more with Woody today. I think Obamacare is dead if the Supreme Court does that. And I think Woody's also correct that all these people who keep saying, oh, there are millions of people, like my two kids are, right now on insurance because they're under 26, oh, they're going to be all upset. Too bad. I think the Republicans have shown they do not care about that. They want to protect money. They want to protect, they want to attack Obama. And by the way, they'll have a replacement plan one of these decades. So I actually do agree with Woody. I think that Missouri and Kansas surprised the legislators, surprised a lot of people by saying, no, we don't want your free money. And then that forced the federal government to come in with their own things. And if those go away, I think Kansas and Missouri are loath to adopt anything. And I think they'll say, screw you, and this is what you're going to get, and Obamacare will die.
And Steve, to wrap it up, the controversial MIT economist Jonathan Gruber said as much on the videos that we've seen. He said, we're going to give them lots of money and they can't resist it. They'll take it and start these exchanges because of the federal money. Their citizens will complain if they don't.
Well, he wasn't right about them starting their exchanges because, only about half of them did.
But his argument was the law was written so that they would be forced to.
Well, that's right. If the Republicans had their way, they'd repeal Medicare. Okay, they tried to kill it at the time, the very same thinking people that want to kill Obamacare. And yeah, it's a step toward what Western European socialism. Yes, it is. I wish we'd do it and keep going.
All right. The Kansas City Star's editorial board says there are smart ways to deal with the region's and the nation's infrastructure problems, and they all have one thing in common: charging you more to drive. The Star wants a federal gas tax increase. The current rate is 18 cents a gallon, and says with the lower gasoline prices, it will hardly be noticed by drivers. Missouri should not only consider a toll on I-70, now being studied by a state commission, but should also look hard at tolls for other state highways and roads. And finally, Kansas should reverse the Brownback tax cuts and restore the $100 million from the highway fund diverted by the governor to help staunch the hemorrhaging budget. So let's look at each of these and start with the idea of hiking the federal gas tax. Are you ready for a gas tax increase, Amy?
No, I love my gas prices where they are. I drive a hybrid, and so pulling up at the tank and finding out I only have to fill up and it's $30 every couple weeks, I'm in heaven. So no, but I am for toll roads. So I definitely agree that I think Missouri is lacking when it comes to having more toll roads. So
well, let's stick with the gas tax increase right now. Yale, I'm confident you're in favor of it. It was written by the Star editorial board, of which you're part.
I'm confident that I wrote an excellent editorial. And actually, that's 25 years of writing the same thing, and the gas tax has not changed in more than 20 years. The federal one hasn't not. But the big thing, if you look at the actual gas tax, people complain, it's going down because people are driving more Priuses, things like that. But it's still bringing in a ton of money. And actually, the best thing about the gas tax is user pays. I mean, that is the single best thing going for it. Same thing with toll roads, user pays. But you also have this idea where on an inflationary scale, 18 cents out of when it was less than $1, now it's 18 cents out of 2. Well, in a few years ago, it was 18 cents out of 4. So, I mean, the actual proportion is far lower than it is now. And taxes, they've done one other study that gas taxes, actually produce revenue that go into roads, that actually hire people, that produce a benefit for millions of Americans. So it's like one of those programs that I'm sure actually a lot of Republicans embrace in other states. They actually have embraced it.
Woody, wouldn't this be a bad time to raise the gas tax, considering the economy is still fragile, and this is seen as a great boost to the economy for consumers to have this additional money?
Well, we're in Missouri and Kansas. I know about Missouri, so let's stick to Missouri. Missouri raised the gas tax 1 penny in 1951 and gave the highway department 10,000 more miles of road to take care of. It was raised twice under John Ashcroft. It hasn't been raised since. Our gas tax today, 17 cents a gallon, is the average state gas tax as of 1985.
Yeah, but what about the federal tax?
The federal tax you shouldn't raise because they
Okay,
steal too much of the money. They put an IOU into the Highway Trust Fund, take the money and spend it on GR. We're fools to give the feds more money. But we should raise the fuel tax in Missouri. Tolls are unconstitutional in Missouri, and 80% of the people don't want them.
So the
It isn't gonna
Star's
happen.
calling for unconstitutional
Not in the
action
next
No,
in Missouri?
that's part of his study is you have to have a vote to make it constitutional. Yeah, in Missouri, if they go ahead and do
And
it.
even if and so ultimately you're going to have a vote one way or the
Right,
other
right,
if
exactly.
you ask for tolls. Right now, about 80% of the people don't want them.
Right.
You are in for a long-term public education job to
Yeah.
try and sell tolls in.
So I mean, I think we have definitely supported a Missouri gasoline tax increase, and you're right, closer to the state. That closer to home is the best way to do it. I mean, if Missourians would
believe me,
do
I'm
that,
all
I
for
would love
tolls.
that.
Well, you'd like
But only
Yeah.
70 and 44 will work on it.
But
Yeah,
Yale, you'd
and-
like tax increases at both the state and federal level, would you not?
Well, probably. But I mean, actually, it's unfortunate that Missouri has turned it down in recent years. I'm semi-glad they turned down the sales tax because some of that money was going to be bled elsewhere. But with that said, gasoline tax
So is
usually
the
pays.
I-70 thing dead, or is that a real
Oh,
possibility?
I think it's a very long-term project.
Okay, let's
It's a
look.
long-term project.
Look over here in Kansas. The Star suggests that the legislature should repeal the income tax cuts and take that money and return it to the highway fund so that construction can continue and improvements will take place. How likely do you think that is, Steve Glorioso?
No, I don't think it's likely at all. I mean, Brownback appears to be dropping hints he will consider not stopping the future cuts in the taxes, but that still doesn't quite fill the hole. He would be smart, I think, to do a gasoline tax if it's allowed in Kansas, while gas may be $1.99 in another week, and also do Medicaid expansion. I think the combination of the two might fill the hole that he's created in the budget.
Yale, I read in the New York Times that Sean Sullivan, is that the
Yes.
budget advisor to
Yeah, yeah.
Governor Brownback, and some other GOP legislators were talking about the possibility of a change in taxes, that Brownback might be amenable to that. Sort
Yeah,
of
I mean, Sean has talked about that. We're good Twitter buddies, so I think we're now
I'm confident of
in
that.
the 21st century. That's about the best you can be. But he and others, I think Susan Wagle also kind of said the same thing. Oh, God, Brownback dumped this in our lap in the legislature, the Senate president. So what they really are going to do is one, stop further tax cuts. But, are they going to really repeal the tax cuts themselves? No. More than likely, no, which is too bad. They've got a 10% budget cut coming, possibly.
All right, 6, 2, and 8. At least 6 Kansas City, Missouri council members will leave office in 2015 because they've served 2 terms, a total of 8 years. According to Yale's recent column, the 6 are Johnson, Ford, Curls, Sharp, Markison, and Serco. Sounds like, but is not a law firm. The filing deadline is next month, the primary election in April, and the general in June. It is widely assumed that Sly James will win a second term as mayor. It is not so clear who the new members of the council will be. In a recent column, and now here on Ruckus, Yale says this election is crucial to Kansas City's future and voters should be paying close attention. So Yale, why is this so crucial?
Well, a couple of reasons. One, you are going to have at least 6 new members, and possibly, as I was counting, 9, because a couple of incumbents could face tough fights. So that means you're going to have a large number of new members who may have their own ideas on what to do with the $1.4 billion a year, although we all know they don't control that much, really. The second thing is, I really think this is something where Sly James is going to show some leadership, or needs to show some leadership. I think he's had a very progressive, I look back at the 4 mayors I've covered, he's probably had the best first term of any of those mayors. Barnes and Cleaver both had good second terms. Well, if he has a good second term, that's going to be really good for Kansas City. But the streetcar's going, some downtown stuff's going, employment's up, but education is still working on, law enforcement there's been some success in. I'd love to see Sly roll out a 5-point plan for Kansas City for the next 4 years or something like that, and have some council members get behind it. They don't run slates a lot in city council, but I'd like to see a slate.
You think the mayor
like that.
might put together a slate?
No, I don't think he will. He's not that kind of guy. comma, I wish he would.
Yeah.
Because I think that's one thing that Kansas City lacks. You know, we have a nonpartisan form of government, which I love. You know, we're not here to talk about Republican, Democrat. It's how they spend the money, which I think is very important. Set priorities, spend the money correctly. And, you know, if Sly James gets behind that and other council members go, oh, I'm for that, great.
Let me stay with you here a second. In your column, you suggest that one councilman who is eligible for re-election, Michael Brooks,
Yes.
Reverend Michael Brooks, should not be re-elected.
Yeah.
What is your reason for that?
Well, he's shown no leadership whatsoever, and he's been in at least 2 high-profile dust-ups calling into question his character.
Most recently alleged to have choked one of his employees.
Well, yeah, that could be bad. But I mean, you know, but this council, you know, that's the other good thing about this particular city council is they have been not totally free, but free of some of the stuff that Steve and I specifically remember from many years ago, with people, you know, bombastically going off on rants against staff and all that kind of stuff.
Amy, Yale observes, and I think it's true, that Mayor James is rather popular,
Very
and
popular.
at the moment seems to be pretty certain to be reelected.
Yes.
What about him do you think is appealing? Why do you think he's doing so well?
Because he reaches out so well to the community. I mean, he's so accessible, and I think that's why he puts a good face on Kansas City. He's very involved in social media, which I think is great for the city. I mean, I feel like I can reach out to him anytime, and he responds. I mean, that's just amazing for a mayor. I think he really listens. He's always been so proactive of putting such a good face on Kansas City, and I don't see any reason why he's not going to have a great second term. So.
Woody, what issues would you like to see talked about widely during this campaign for council and mayor?
Same question I always have. Why are we spending $1,100 a resident more than comparable cities spend to run our city government? But I want to say I agree with Yale about something I felt strongly about for a long time. We need, as a more or less permanent feature of our nonpartisan government, slates, recognizable organizations that back slates of candidates who stand for something, so that each of them isn't running on his or her own agenda, and you get 13 people in there with 13 different agendas, and no particular reason for any of those agendas to move.
That did exist at an earlier time.
Yes, it did. And the Citizens Association used to really mean something, and you knew if you voted for their slate what you were getting. And if the mayor would undertake to do what Yale's recommending, he'd be doing us a favor.
So Steve, you've worked in Kansas City, Missouri government, top aide to Kay Barnes during her tenure as mayor. You've been around for a long time, know what's going on. What issues do you want talked about?
Well, you know, I don't see anything that's going to dominate, but the expansion of streetcar, downtown hotel, the airport, things like that I think are going to be issues because different council candidates will bring them up, whether the mayor does or not.
What about the disruption of business downtown because of the streetcar construction?
Well, there is disruption, of course, but you know, it's slowly working itself out. I was able to get to the city market the other day for lunch. Please go downtown and shop and eat. You know, it's just, I think that's going to be, you know, the election we ran for streetcar, within truce to state line all the way to the plaza, it did pass. And that would be the logical expansion, but I think they're going to probably let it get up on its running and people will like it. So I think that could be an issue. Another issue could be an increase in the minimum wage, which I would hope that somebody would propose, as other progressive cities have done.
All right, it is time now for Roast and Toast, where the Ruckettes offer a pat on the back or a kick in the pants to people or events in the news. And we start with Amy Patton.
Yeah, I want to toast Sean Sullivan, of all people, the budget director for the state of Kansas. I wrote a pretty scathing blog this week about him and some of the problems with the state of Kansas, and I actually gave him a nickname of S2, it's kind of ribbing him, and he actually came out on Twitter and asked that he only be referred to as S2. So I appreciate his sense of humor in a very difficult job that he's got as budget director for the state of Kansas.
My roast is for Dick Cheney, who was interviewed by Bret Baier about the issue of torture in a really great interview, out of which Cheney did not come through very well. Look, we may or may not have been compelled to do these things, but the idea that they shouldn't trouble us, you can be compelled to do things, you may have to do them. That doesn't mean they shouldn't bother you. And Cheney's attitude is, I'm never going to lose a minute's sleep over this. I'm never going to think about this. You have to. It has to bother you. It may be you had no choice. Still isn't nice. It ought to bother you. And his attitude that it shouldn't is very troubling. Ought to be.
A toast to that toast. That's a great toast. Or roast, actually. Real quickly, I've lived in Kansas City, Missouri since 1979. I want to make that clear up front. A lot of people, just because my kids went to Raytown schools and I live over in East Kansas City, think I live in Raytown. I don't. I live in Kansas City. But this is a toast to the retiring mayor of Raytown, David Bauer. He's continuing really to help Raytown become a more progressive city. I know it's a joke to many people who have never been there or gone to the school there or had a church there as I have, but it is a city that is on the come, and David Bauer is part of the reason for that.
I would like to toast the president, our president of the United States. I could not be more proud of Barack Obama as I am right today, matter of fact. He's still working and is pretty far down the track of pulling this country back from near economic collapse. He's the first president to pass national health insurance, something that eluded Franklin Roosevelt, Harry Truman, John Kennedy, etc. He stopped the Ebola crisis, even though it was a phony crisis. You noticed, haven't had a case since the election. He has also brought Putin to his knees with the economic sanctions, along with the gas price. He reversing ISIS gains, the immigration policy, and today with the announcement this week of the Cuba, no wimp is he, GOP.
All right, finally, a toast to Kansas City Kansan editor Nick Sloan, who calls on the Kansas legislature to adopt daylight saving time year-round. Apparently, this is permissible under federal law. Sloan says it could save lives on the road, reduce energy costs, and help hold down crime. Now, there may well be reasons to oppose the concept, but seeing daylight more often strikes me as a bright idea. And that is Ruckus for this week and this year. We're away for the next 2 weeks and then back on January the 8th. Now, on behalf of the Ruckettes, let me offer best wishes for a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Joyous New Year, and any other holiday-related observance in which you take part. Thanks very much for joining us, and good night.